that these folks are really the brightest and the best, and they are more intelligent than we are. And it's only right and proper that they run everything because they only have our best interest at heart. Well, let's look back over just the past 100 years. They've given us 2 world wars, 2 depressions, one acknowledged and the one currently not. And doesn't sound like they're operating in our best interest. Not at all. Going back past the Gulf War, and now we get back to Vietnam, and Lyndon Johnson and his wise men, okay? He surrounded himself with about 12, 14 guys, and they were every one of them Council on Foreign Relations. In fact, Vietnam, the thing I never could quite figure out is why were we fighting 9,000 miles away from the shores of the United States? Well, let me tell you why. Because right after World War II, the Council on Foreign Relations published some papers that were saying we needed to gain control over the mineral resources of Southeast Asia, which at that time was called French Indochina. All right, but then in the spring of 1954, the French got defeated at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, and they withdrew from French Indochina. Within weeks, John Foster Dulles, a founder of the Council on Foreign Relations, and who was then Secretary of State to Dwight Eisenhower, goes to the Philippines and creates something called the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, SEATO. And he later explained that he did that to give the American president the legal precedent for intervention in Southeast Asia. That was the beginning of the whole thing. Now, is he acting on the best interest of the United States, or is he acting on the best interest of the Council on Foreign Relations that wanted control over those mineral resources? And of course, I don't have to tell you what happened. 58,000 American lives later, we finally slunk away with our tail between our legs, defeated by a bunch of guys in rubber sandals, thanks to the wise men. And in the middle of this, when our guys are dying in the jungles of Vietnam, who's over in Russia but David Rockefeller meeting with Khrushchev? And with the insistence of David Rockefeller and his other powerful friends at the Council on Foreign Relations, they encouraged Lyndon Johnson to increase loans to Russia at levels higher than we did in World War II when they were our allies against Hitler. Now, what does this mean? It means, folks, that while our sons and daughters and brothers and husbands were over there fighting for their lives in the jungles of Vietnam, we were told we had to do that because North Vietnam was a surrogate of China and Russia, and that if we didn't stop them there, then it's the domino effect, and they'd take over the Philippines, and they'd take over Hawaii, and they'd take over this country, and we had to stop them right there. And that they were getting arms and ammunition from China and Russia, and it was an anti-communist crusade. And to that extent, it was true. They were getting arms and ammunition and war materials from China and Russia. And Russia was getting loans from us. And they take our tax-supported money and they'd build facilities like the Kama River Truck Factory, and they'd crank out war materials to ship to North Vietnam to use against our guys. Does that make any sense to anybody? But that's what goes on, folks, and it's still going on. And unless we start waking up, it's going to continue. You're going back to Korea, you find out that Russian generals were running the Korean War on both sides. Does that make any sense? And yet the bulk of the Allied troops was our guys, United States military, supported by our tax dollars. We're really being taken, folks. Go all the way back to World War II. Well, let me tell you, folks, do your homework. Hitler didn't just suddenly appear. Hitler, number one, was a military intelligence agent who was assigned to infiltrate the Nazi Party. And he went back to his superiors and said, well, went to this meeting, there's only about 9 guys there, but you'd like them because they want to rebuild Germany and they hate the Jews and they want to rearm and they want to repudiate the Versailles Treaty. So his superior said, that sounds pretty good. Here's some money, go back and help out. So they created Hitler. And then as he began to gain more power, who was behind him? Another secret society, the Thule-Gesellschaft, or the Thule Society, made up of some of the leading industrialists, leading intellectuals in Germany at the time. People, and also people who had an intimate working knowledge of the occult. All right? So now we can see that all of these secret societies have been working along. And it was the same thing back during World War I. Same people ran World War I. It's amazing, but at the time of the Russian Revolution, where was Lenin? He wasn't in Russia. He was in Switzerland. Where was Leon Trotsky, the communist key philosopher? He wasn't in Russia. He was in New York City working for Wall Street capitalists. And they gave him money, and they gave him all kinds of support to go into Russia and take over a popular uprising and change it into a communist government. Lenin was the same thing. We all know that he was put on a sealed railroad car and traveled through wartime Germany that was at war with Russia, and was sent on into Russia to take over the government and set up the communist system. And one of the people who helped facilitate that was a leading banker in Germany who also was very highly connected with German intelligence, and that was a fellow by the name of Max Warburg. Now, don't you find it passing strange that in World War I, Max Warburg, who was head of German intelligence and a big leading banker there in Germany, his brother, Paul Warburg, founded the Federal Reserve System in our country, and at that time was head of the financial end of World War I for the United States of America. Does nobody find that amazing?